welcome back to The Short Game. This is a show where we talk about short video games, little short ones, the kind of thing you can pick up and complete in an evening or a weekend. I'm your host, Reagan Kelly, and I am joined this week by Nate Heininger. How are you doing, Nate?
I'm doing well. Glad to be back.
And my bro host, Shane Kelly. How are you doing, Shane?
I'm so good. Life is beautiful.
So this is going to be a kind of a weird episode for us. This has been an amazing summer for games. I mean, if you are watching the releases on Steam or on the PlayStation Network, you've been seeing a lot of interesting stuff pop up. And we've been playing a ton of games, and many of them this summer have been things that we loved, but that don't really fit our format or our, the type of games that we tend to devote a whole episode to. And so we just wanted to make sure that we had a chance to talk a little bit about some of these really awesome games we've been playing this summer, some of which we may have mentioned already in some form on this show, some of which we haven't, that for whatever reason probably aren't going to get a full episode of The Short Game, but we really, really, really wanted to talk about them with each other and maybe with recording apparatus.
Yeah, when you think about big seasons for games, summer to me was always the season when no big games were coming out. But now that we're doing this show, I'm not waiting for the big Christmas releases. There's those little indie titles are dropping all year round. And so kind of discovering that maybe summer is the new Christmas.
We've played a few things that I thought we would take a minute and chat about. And the first one that I know we've all played and that I was really excited to talk about on this show, and that for whatever reason we just haven't been able to fit a whole episode around, is N++.
Yep.
Yeah, this game is great. It is the most pure platformer that I've ever played. I guess VVV might make a argument for that, but this does away with any attempt at story, any attempt at characterization. It's just, here's a ridiculous amount of small levels that are going to get increasingly frustratingly difficult. And it's been a ton of fun. I love platformers, so this game has been perfect.
The history on this game is a little bit interesting. It's the sequel to N+, which came out, I think, on the Nintendo DS, which was in turn a sequel to N, which was I think it was a Flash game, right? I never played N. Shane, you've played some of the prequels, right?
Yeah, I did. This is a long time ago. I can't remember even now where I played it. I want to say like Newgrounds or something. And it was, it was originally a Flash game, and it was the first game that really I played that kind of tried to distill the essence of the platformer, the action platformer. I would put it up in kind of the vaulted halls of the top 2D indie platformers of all time. That would be up there with your Cave Story, Shovel Knight, Rogue Legacy, VVVVV.
It's an incredibly refined game. It's very stripped down. So looking at the game, it's beautiful, but it's incredibly minimalistic. Your character is basically a stick man, and you're running through these levels that are essentially just solid color platforms, usually festooned with little gold coins and lots of little enemies that are very simple little geometric shapes that all behave in different interesting ways.
I think you're leaving out a key description too, is they are single panel. It is the one screen that you are looking at in front of you. Let's say you did it perfectly the first time. Each level can be under 10 seconds.
You could jump real good and die real fast.
But they are almost never completed upon first try. In fact, it has that really satisfying, every time you die, it's kind of like a little catastrophe every single time. Mm-hmm. You might get hit by a little bomb and your entire self explodes across the screen, setting off every other bomb that it touches.
All of the little sticks of your stick man just go flying.
Yeah.
It's really fun to die a lot in this game because it lets you reset instantly, and you pick right back up where you left off, and you're trying these very short, very frenetic little levels where it requires incredible precision in some of them, but because they're all so small, so contained, so short, it doesn't ever really feel overwhelming or frustrating. And you can skip basically any level, which is really important because some of them are so hard that I probably couldn't get them perfect in 100 tries. But what's really interesting about the game is that each level is incredibly tiny and small and compact and actually really well thought out. Each one is a little gem of almost puzzle game level intricacy for a platforming stage. But there are 2,000 some odd levels in this game. I mean, the big achievement of this game, apart from just creating an incredibly stripped down, perfected platforming game experience, they hand built, these are not generated in any way, 2,360 levels that come with this game. And there's an editor, I believe, or some community level creation aspect as well. So each level is these polished little gems, but there are so many of these. It's almost endless.
Yeah. If you're, I've been sitting here trying to think of like a good comp for how the controller feels. A good platformer, you have to... Your hands become it's more like you're teaching your hands how to play than anything else, like the way the controller feels in your hands and the way the characters slide and the way gravity works for them. The only comp I can think of would be Guacamelee at its hardest. The way that you're sticking on walls a lot and using kind of your momentum and bouncing off of walls between each other. It's not exactly like Guacamelee, but I did feel that kind of like I have to hold myself pressed against this wall, slide down exactly the right amount of distance before jumping over to the other wall, sliding down, and then jumping up that wall just perfectly or I'm done. And that reminded me a lot of Guacamelee.
Yeah, I can see that. And it's also, though, incredibly fast. Guacamelee always felt a little bit deliberate because your walking speed was so slow. You could move faster by doing things like dashes, but... you're actually a very, very fast-moving character, and your jumps are unbelievably long. It's just that you have relatively little control over your jump once you take off, and so you have to do these incredibly perfectly aligned and planned jumps. It's really, really clever. It's
it's a little slippery.
Yeah, they give you this incredible freedom of movement, but then they surround you with like things that are trying to murder you.
Spikes and bombs.
Or homing missiles. There's homing missiles. There's like little laser guys. There's little like carts that just, once you land in front of them, they go really fast. Every type of platformer bad guy is represented somehow in this game. There's little slow-moving guys. There's little fast-moving guys. There's lasers. There's guns.
And every one of the 2,360 levels has, it's a single room and it has a title. It reminded me a little bit of VVV in that way, because sometimes the titles are just a flat title. Other times they're a bit of a joke or a hint about what to try, what mechanic you should be using.
Yeah.
It's everything about this game just bleeds care and attention to detail. And I was really glad I had a chance to play it co-op recently, which there's a co-op mode. My brother-in-law came into town and we sat down and played the co-op mode for, I didn't get very long to play, maybe about an hour. But there's a whole set of levels in this that are just for co-op, and it felt a little bit like the co-op experience of something like Portal, or Portal 2, where you have to sort of plan where each person is going to be, and really there's a more puzzle gamey aspect to it in the two-player cooperative mode, because you only have to get one of you to the goal, but very frequently the level is constructed so it seems almost impossible to get either of you to the goal, and you have to kind of puzzle your way through with multiple deaths how to get one of you to the goal. It's really, really clever.
One of the things that I always liked about the game, even though it's the most simple thing about it, is the art style, which is very minimal. But the thing, it always just reminded me of Lode Runner, which was always something that I was always a big adoring fan of ever since it showed up somehow on the Macintosh that was my first computer. So yeah, anything that's a game I'd love to see brought back is Lode Runner.
I was just playing Lode Runner. I went to a flea market and found a copy of the NES version of Lode Runner. Which is great too. Like, it's super fun. Although what was really weird about it was that it was a port by a Japanese company, and I'm trying to recall exactly. It was Hudson. Hudson did the port, and so rather than being that very kind of cool, fast-moving black and white Stickman, it has this very NES look to it. So the characters, the bad guy characters, all look like Bomberman. And it's actually interesting because that game came out first. They used this sprite from the NES port of Lode Runner, became the sprite for Bomberman in those games later, which I thought was pretty interesting.
Bomberman is a great series.
Yeah, it's so good.
It is one of the most fun party multiplayer games.
It really is. That's actually weirdly enough, that's another one that I played with my brother-in-law while he was in town, and we played a 4-player game of Bomberman on the SNES, and that game still stands up as a really great fun party experience. So weird digression, but Bomberman is awesome.
Yeah, right on.
Speaking of multiplayer, the other game that I've been playing an absolute ton of over the last few weeks, and this probably won't be a huge surprise if you've been listening to the podcast because I know I've mentioned it elsewhere, but I've been playing a ton of Rocket League.
Boom. Yeah. Rocket car soccer.
Woo. It's amazing. I was not expecting this game at all. I mean, I am not a competitive multiplayer person, and I was not expecting this game to... Honestly, I was not expecting any game ever to bring me back to the world of competitive online multiplayer games. And yet this game has me obsessed with its competitive online multiplayer mode, which is basically its only mode.
It's the hats, right?
Yes.
I don't know if there's much that I have to say about Rocket League that I haven't already said on the show. It's car soccer. The van is the best car.
They all have this. They're all the same.
Van represent. No, they're not.
Yeah, us fat boys got to represent our van.
I like the little Japanese car, and I like when it wears a fez. That's the best.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about some of the specifics though. So I mean, I think that the handling is really nice. It's a really satisfying little car that you're driving around. I think there's a lot of thought was gone into it. Like your turning radius most of the time is wider than the ball actually is. So it's really hard to make a perfect tight spiral and hit the ball. Most of the time you end up kind of driving in this silly circle right around it while everyone's kind of bumper carring each other. Mm-hmm. And while it's mostly chaotic, there is, as you play it more, there's definitely like legit soccer strategies, I guess, who's controlling what zone and how the plays are making on the ball. It's really satisfying when the game works, when everyone kind of works as a team.
Yeah, it's more sport-like than any quote-unquote esport that I've ever sort of watched or tried to play, with my meager abilities myself. It really does sort of, when it's really working, it really does feel like a team sport. And even when it's not working, it just feels like a kind of a hectic, fun multiplayer thing. There's not that much to say about it. If you've seen Rocket League, you can understand everything there is to know about this game in a minute. I mean, it has some kind of neat tricks that you can pull off if you know a little bit about the game's boost mechanics and jump mechanics and things like that. But more or less, you're all a bunch of cars. You can drive fairly fast. There's boosts and there's a ball and you have to hit it into a goal. And you're usually playing 2-on-2 or 3-on-3. We played this just recently, actually 4-on-4, which is a little crazy because it gets kind of crowded. They actually call that
silly.
Chaos mode or something like that. And a brief shout out to our listener Brian who joined us on the team and was our fourth man, and he's way better than us.
Yeah, I was gonna say, let's not call him our fourth man, Brian.
He took point on that. We got crushed a lot, but
MVP.
He was the MVP of every game.
It was like the three of our scores combined was like a third of what Brian scored.
So shout out to Brian. Thank you for helping us win at least one game.
We had the best moment of my Rocket League life, which is brief but still, and also the most depressing moment of my Rocket League life, which was it was after Shane, you had left, so it was me, Reagan, and Brian, and we were losing a game 3-2, and seriously, Brian scored with 1 second left on the clock.
That was amazing.
I didn't think he was going to make it. We were watching it because it's kind of a big field, and even though you're in rocket cars, it's not. It takes longer than it would sound like when we describe this game to get across the field. And so we were just watching him push the ball like a clear goal, but the clock was ticking and he scored with 1 second left. And I know Reagan screamed. I pretty much jumped, and Brian was also pretty loud.
He was very cool. No, he was he was excited, but this is no big thing for
another
Brian.
Just all in a day's work for him.
Yeah, exactly.
And then so we went to overtime, And how fast did we lose? 15 seconds? I
Oh
think?
yeah, it was garbage, but it was a good moment anyway.
Yeah, it was like immediate.
Those highs and lows, man.
The
Yep,
game is
Rocket League.
incredibly fun. So if you have a PlayStation 4, both N++ and Rocket League, so far we've talked about our PlayStation 4 games. N++ is exclusive to the PS4. Rocket League is out also on PC on Steam. And one thing that I think is really interesting about it is that it is cross-platform multiplayer. People on PC can play against people on PS4 and so on. Unfortunately, they do not have an option to create parties that include people from both. So if you're wanting to play with your friends, you do have to be on the same platform. And apparently that's more of a policy restriction than a technical one. Maybe that'll get lifted eventually, but I wouldn't hold your breath. So I would try to play on the same platform as your friends. It's $20 on Steam. It was a free PlayStation Plus game in last month's PlayStation Plus games, or I think it's $20 on the PS4 now if you happen to have missed out on that for some reason. It's incredible. I think it's the next big esport. I'm watching a lot of it on Twitch. I don't do that. I don't watch things on Twitch, so I'm loving it. It's amazing.
Did we say yet that when you score a goal, the ball explodes and all the cars go flying? Because I think
we mentioned that on a previous episode when we talked about this game, but that is one of those design decisions that it's like, whoever thought that up, you were a genius.
Well, and it was presented in the production meeting like, hey, what if the ball explodes when they score and everyone goes flying? And everyone's just like, Yep. Put it in the game.
Done.
You have the day. Make that happen.
Well, actually, you can tell there's a lot of polish on this game. They clearly were going for, we want this to be a really polished esport ready experience. It's the sequel of a previous game which went by the title Supersonic Acrobatic Rocket Powered Battle Cars.
Better name.
Debatably better name, but probably harder to Google and remember. So it's clear they've had a lot of time to work on this concept and polish it and make it ready. This game launched ready for prime time, except for the servers, which went down a lot during the first week. But apart from that, this game is so polished. It's the perfect competitive multiplayer game. I've been enjoying the hell out of it.
Yeah, I think to make a game good for constant multiplayer, it has to feel balanced, which it is. I mean, the cars apparently are minorly different, though I don't think you can really tell unless you play a ton. But also, and this is really hard to accomplish, you pretty much never feel cheated in this game by anything. Like most
occasionally there's lag and maybe that would be a problem, but yeah, like almost never. It's very fair.
It's fair by abusing everyone equally. Like everyone is everyone is being subjected to these horrible controls. It's like competitive QWOP.
That's not at all true, Shane. That's really unfair. The game has really tight controls. Once you get used to its driving mechanic, the one thing that I think is really takes some getting used to is that there's two camera modes.
There's don't crash mode and eye on the ball mode.
Right, yeah. The sort of the ball cam mode where the camera tracks the ball. It's always above your car, but tracking the ball can be really confusing at first because, you might hold left and actually left, it's like your car's left and maybe your car is facing to the right, which means, you might be driving in a way that you weren't expecting.
It's just that the ball bounces and is smaller than it, like its hitbox is smaller than you would think, so it's constantly missing. Or I'll be going straight for the ball, and it makes just the perfect little bounce, and I go right under it. And I'm going really fast, so now I've zoomed past the ball, made it like into midfield, and you have to spin all the way around and come back at it. So it really rewards patience in a game that you're controlling rocket cars. So I am not going to be patient.
And it also really rewards coordination, which is really interesting. I have been doing so much better in games where I'm actually talking to my teammates on mic, even just for simple stuff like, oh, hey, do you see that? Like, okay, yes, I see it. We got it. Like, it allows you to coordinate a little bit and do some coordination that actually is a little more like hockey than soccer, like, flying Vs, that kind of thing, playing the edge of the field.
You never did a flying V.
There's no way I've seen it done. I can't
There's
pull it off.
Okay.
But I've seen it done. I've seen it done on Twitch, and those guys are really doing it.
Did they do a knuckle puck after that?
I don't even know what that is.
Oh, come on. D2, Mighty Ducks 2. All right. Move on.
Damn, I lost my 90s cred, guys.
Yeah, come on.
One other game that I was really looking forward to playing and maybe talking about on the show, which actually didn't end up being something that I was all too thrilled with. And listeners of this show know we basically don't do bad reviews. If we play a game and we don't enjoy it, we mostly just don't talk about it on the show. And there have been a few examples of games where we had mixed opinions about them. Things like our Contrast episode, where we talked about the game being really cool, having a lot of good ideas, but also feeling really unfinished, and we had a lot to say about that. But we don't really do bad reviews. Why waste your time telling you every reason that a game is shit?
Yeah. And we've had a couple games that we were like, let's do it. We all play it. And we're just like, nah. Yeah. What, like what Reagan said, like, I know that I wouldn't just put on a podcast of an hour long of a bunch of people talking about a game that kind of sucks. So we generally, but let's do it anyway.
Yeah.
Reagan?
Well, I do want to very briefly talk about a game I played for the show that we decided not to do an episode on, but I played it recently and it hasn't gotten a ton of press. So I thought people might be wondering what it was all about. We played Submerged, which is it's a game in the vein of things like Eco or Brothers, Tale of Two Sons, which we've talked about A Tale of Two Sons on this show before, and maybe someday we'll do an episode on Eco, actually.
One of our best games we've played for the show.
Yeah, it was a really fun game. I mean, I thought Brothers was amazing.
Yeah.
And speak of Eco, it's the 10-year anniversary of Shadow of the Colossus just came out.
Oh, wow. Jeez.
Can you believe it?
I can't. I should go and replay those. But anyway, the Submerged has that same kind of style. It's a game where you are a lone, weaponless, youngster. In this case, you're a teenage girl, and you're exploring a submerged city, hence the title. It's not really stated right out, but it's very obvious immediately that this is some sort of post-climate change thing where we're looking at an American or otherwise at least English-speaking developed city that has been flooded to the point where it's now abandoned, and there's trees growing out of the husks of all the buildings, and you're a sort of tribal-esque looking young girl who's bringing her injured brother. He's got some kind of a wound in his chest to this city in order to help him with his wound. So he's going to he's injured, and you're there to look for supplies. So presumably it's happening maybe, I don't know, 50 years or maybe even much longer after a significant climate change thing, and all the people are gone, but you're there to help your brother. That's the story. That's it. The entire story of the game is exploring this submerged city, using your sort of binoculars or telescope, rather, to look for emergency supplies that are invariably in these sort of crates on top of buildings, climbing up those buildings, finding the emergency supplies, bringing them back to your brother. There's zero combat, which I actually like in a lot of games that try to find other ways to give you a game experience other than combat. Things that are often called walking simulators or some other pejorative thing.
Yes, I think that's my new favorite genre.
Yeah.
The walking simulator.
Co-op, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, so
Octodad. I don't know.
So walking simulator. It's just that type of video game that lacks all the kind of normal trappings of video games, like a goal or win-loss conditions or
basic entertainment.
Yes. So it's our favorite kind. I mean, one of our favorite genres of games is this, and I think the name kind of started off as a pejorative, like, oh, hey, what is that game? It's not even a game. It's just a walking simulator. But I do think over the past little while, we've gotten some really amazing examples of it, and some of which we've even done for the show.
Our very first episode was on Gone Home. It was one of the games that sort of inspired me to do this show. I mean, it's a genre that it's the only genre maybe that is really breaking new ground with new gameplay mechanics and new ideas. I mean, that's hyperbolic, but there's a ton of really interesting stuff happening in that space.
Yeah, we've just had this year, Gardenarium was one of these. I don't know if any of you guys got a chance to try that one out.
No, I haven't played that.
Yeah, it's like a cross between a walking simulator and a hallucinatory drug trip.
Sounds like a plus.
The Vanishing of Ethan Carter.
Yeah, that was another really excellent, but this is far more trippy. This is gonna literally make you puke if you stare at it for too long. But it's the thing about that genre to me that is interesting and why I think it works is that it gets you really to pay attention to a story, and it gives this story kind of room to breathe. It's a genre that's as much about the fiction of exploring the story as it is about the cool visuals that you might have or anything like that. And it's not about running and jumping and climbing. And for me, that's where Submerged kind of fell short. It has a story that's like a frame.
It's a very simple
that
story.
You're unlocking, but and it has some of the trappings of normal games, like the climbing and things like that. But it was all very, very sparse. To make things like this work, you have to have that feel of being there. And there were so many little things in Submerged that pulled me out of that feeling of being there. Like if you try and get into a boat in Submerged, which is something you're going to do all the time, it cuts away because they didn't have an animation for you getting in and out of the boat.
There's a lot of little things about this game that are. I mean, that's something that I kind of could forgive. That's a tiny thing. But it's a good observation. But really, the big problem with this game is that it's very repetitive. You're exploring this incredibly nicely put together submerged city, and you're exploring it in a little kayak. But essentially, all you're doing is trying to find these 10 objects amongst all of these, lovingly crafted buildings. But all of the buildings are a little samey. Some of the buildings have some distinguishing factors, and there's some interesting landmarks, like a big Ferris wheel or a large bridge, or some buildings that have particularly interesting architecture. But by and large, all the buildings are a little bit samey. And then you're driving around these on your little boat. When you come to one where you have where there's an object on top of it, you can climb up it. But there is basically a single path up the building, and the climbing mechanics, I mean, this is no Assassin's Creed or anything. The climbing is just repeating the same steps of climbing up, maybe climbing to the left or to the right, trying to find the path up. When you get to the top, that's it. You found your thing. You head back to your little brother and you patch him up with whatever object it was that you found. And the dialogue is all in a sort of, I think it's a faux language, like it's not real language, kind of like we saw in Brothers. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Which means that we don't really get any actual story. The story is told to us mostly through these sort of little pictograms that we kind of unlock as we go. It doesn't have enough story to support it as a narrative experience. It doesn't have enough gameplay to support it as a gameplay experience. It
doesn't have enough characterization. Like I think that the trope of having your video game characters speak a made up language is only one step above having the nameless, faceless character be the lead, which in terms of my least favorite tropes.
Yeah, but we loved it for Brothers, though. Or at least
we did,
I did.
Yeah.
I thought
which
it was
is
a great
weird
touch
because
with Brothers.
that game pulled it off, I think, because first off, the settings were dazzling. It was incredible variety. And even though all we really knew about these brothers was there's a younger brother and an older brother, it had real pathos, particularly towards the ending. Obviously, we won't spoil any of that. Go play that game. It's really neat.
Yeah, I still think about that game all the time, actually. I loved Brothers.
It had real pathos, but the younger brother in Submerged, you never see him as anything other than a sick kid lying on a bench. You don't have that arc with him where you're get attached to him and then he is ill or something. So it's the entire game is just get a bunch of stuff, give it to the kid. Once you give it all to the kid is fine, and you leave. And that's it.
Spoilers.
I know, spoilers, but do not play this game. It's bad. I'm sorry, guys. It was just I hate saying that, but it was a really I did not enjoy it. And I completed it. I played the whole way through. Maybe it took me 3 or 4 hours maybe at the most.
Was this done using the Unreal Engine?
Yes, it was.
It sounds like it. I think
it actually looked pretty good, like visually.
Well, that's the thing with that right now is people are getting really good at making really pretty games with Unreal. And I wonder if sometimes that becomes almost too much of the focus. Like Brothers was so good because it was beautiful and also just enough, like just the 2 joystick mechanic was like enough to keep you engaged in it.
Yeah.
While also enjoying the scenery.
This game, it just didn't bring anything new or interesting. I was just really bored by it. So we dwelled on this far longer than I kind of intended to. I just wanted to mention it as a game that really seemed like it was going to sort of fit our wheelhouse and was a bit of a disappointment. So sorry to say.
Well, I'm glad you guys played it and not me.
Oh, well.
I'll soften my opinion on it a little bit. I do think that if you have like $15 to spend and an afternoon's worth of time, there are definitely worse games that you could play. And if you just want to play something where you're not being, hunted by mercenaries, if you want a little change of pace, it's not the worst choice you could make.
Yeah, and it is very relaxing. So if you're into that style of game, it might be for you. But I didn't feel it had enough going on to warrant. I didn't loathe my time with it, but throughout the entire game, I kept expecting them to show me something else. But it was always this climbing mechanic and then floating around on your little boat to find something else to climb. And that was it. That was really all there was to it. There just wasn't enough there.
So, speaking of boats, I know we've been talking about this game. I just feel like this is the perfect segue. I did finally build my boat. You Must Build a Boat. It took me 9 hours to complete this game.
Wow.
Fortunately, it is...
That puts it almost out of short game territory.
Which for an iPhone game, yeah, impressive.
Well, that's what I mean. And it was $3. I don't generally care about match 3 games. This is probably the most I've ever played a match 3 game, other than maybe like Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine on my Sega Genesis.
A classic.
Yeah,
Great
like,
game.
20 years ago. And I'm not making... That is probably the other game that I've spent the most time on in this genre. But I was hooked, and it's a far deeper game than I was expecting. It is also very, very challenging. 9 hours was a lot of me playing the same level over and over. And I was okay with it, which is strange. Like, I generally, I'm not afraid of a challenge. I like difficult games, but I will get, kind of bored with it pretty easily. But this game kept my attention the entire time. The additional, it gets more complex, more spells, more items, more tools. I loved this game, and I can't recommend it enough.
I'm still loving it. I've only spent about 7 hours in it, and I have it has an in-game timer, so I'm able to tell that. And I haven't quite completed my boat yet. For those who haven't been following along, because for some reason, we keep bringing this game up. We have talked about You Must Build a Boat on almost every episode of this show for the last 2 months. But it's a really good iPhone game. If you aren't already familiar, the short version is it's a match 3 puzzle game in which you are matching puzzles in order to progress through dungeons. And by completing objectives in the dungeon, you unlock pieces for your boat, which then carries you to the next dungeon. It's kind of silly and kind of a hodgepodge. but it's really, really, really well done. The match 3 mechanics are really polished. Nate may not be a huge match 3 guy, but I've played a lot of match 3 puzzle games. I'm by no means like a god at them or anything, but I love my Puyo, I love my Tetris, I love my Puzzle Quest. This actually reminds me
Excuse me, Puyo is a match 4.
Oh, you're right. Excuse me. But this actually reminds me a lot of Puzzle Quest, which I played quite a bit of, particularly Puzzle Quest 2. But it's like Puzzle Quest really narrowed down to just the parts that were active and fun. The games are really short. One thing that I like a lot about it was that every time you go into a dungeon, you can decide how many objectives you're going to sort of take on, and the more objectives you take on, the harder your gameplay experience is. So it's actually kind of scalable. You can decide, I don't really have time to play really in depth right now. I'm going to try to do a little bit of a lighter run, or I'm going to do a lot of objectives and really go hard at it or something.
Yeah, I was 100% of the time I played, it was max objectives the entire time. I feel like it would actually take longer if you didn't do that.
I think that's probably been part of the reason that I am taking longer with it, because I like that scalability, and it's a heavy duty game, but it's in tiny enough bites, and it's scalable enough that I can play it waiting in line someplace, or I can play it while I'm, waiting to get my hair cut, or while I'm waiting on hold on the phone. Like it's a great balance of a game with a lot going on that you can play in these tiny little mobile-sized bites.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it took me about 9 hours to complete, but it really didn't feel that long. I played it in really, on break at work, sitting at home, I never really sat down like, hey, I'm gonna play some You Must Build a Boat. It was like, I got a few minutes to kill, let me play it. And it was fun. Like as it gets deeper, I haven't played a lot of match 3, but it was fun to as it gets harder, there are certain monsters that are affected by certain tiles more so than others, or completely immune to some tiles. So you would actually find yourself knowing that and saving sets of 3, which I don't know of any other match 3 game where I'm like, I don't want to match those 3 right now. I actually want to save matching those 3 until I'm fighting the right type of monster, and then I'll match them. But you have to balance that with the need to refill your board and get new matches.
Yeah, that's a really unique thing about it. In a lot of ways, it plays a bit like Puzzle League, or like Panel de Pon, that style of game, the Pokemon Puzzle League, those games, that series. But it actually is a lot easier in that you can slide things really far. Like you're not limited to just swapping 2 tiles at a time. You can slide whole rows or columns.
Whole rows and match many things at once if you get the right slide.
And there are quests later to match 4 sets of 4 in a row. So it has that beautiful scaling as 4 sets all match at the same time. It's great.
So compared to a lot of match 3 or matching puzzle games, it makes it really easy, and yet it gives you these really interesting challenges that are constantly changing as you play through different dungeons. So I would say probably one of my favorite iPhone games I've played in, a really long time.
And for me, one of my favorite iPhone games, just simply that's enough. It's $2.99. The music is great. I actually the main theme song, and I don't know if you can find it, but if you can drop it in on the episode, I would just open the game and just leave it on the title screen because I wanted to hear the main song, and I would just set it down next to me while I was doing something else. This game, they really took their time with, and that's why. It's not enough for an entire episode on this show because
we've already talked about it a million times.
Sure, and it's one mechanic that just gets deeper, but everything about it is thought out and well constructed. So.
Mm-hmm. It's a super cool game. I like collecting the little dudes. What can I say? I want my boat to have lots of buddies on it.
Yep. Yeah, you get all sorts of friends. And there's secret friends too. I only unlocked one of them, and it was at the very end. Is because I ate a chicken bone while fighting the ice block, and it was hey, secret friend, he loves chicken bones or something like that. And then he joined my boat and gave me like plus 2% against spell damage or something like that.
Funny.
Because that makes sense.
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Yeah, it was great. So we don't need to talk about it too much more. But,
nope. So this brings our discussion of You Must Build a Boat to a close. We've not talked about it on basically every episode for like almost 2 months. So
do you think that maybe one week, if we are in a spot to release something, we go back and edit together like a full episode worth of You Must Build a Boat?
I think we easily could probably do a 40-minute episode of just the random things we've said about You Must Build a Boat after
kind of our bottle episode.
Yeah. So, speaking of mobile games, I actually just started a new game today, and it actually just came out today that I wanted to mention briefly on the show because I was so excited about it. And this is a game that I'd briefly seen on. So I follow a bunch of stuff on Twitter about the Vita because, well, there's not a lot of stuff
needs
coming
all the help
out.
it can get.
It really does. It really does. There's not a lot of cool stuff coming out on the Vita. And it's all multi-platform stuff, and it's all things that that are it's a bit of a wasteland right now. That's not really fair. There's some really neat stuff on it. I'm actually playing it a lot, but I discovered this game because it's one of the few things coming out on the Vita right now. But it's also come out on PlayStation 4 as a cross-buy, and also on Steam, and that's Curses and Chaos, and that's spelled Curses and then capital N Chaos, and I think we briefly talked a while back, way back on this show, about Tribute Games, who are the developers of Mercenary Kings, and also a game that I really, really loved called Wizorb. Wizorb was a breakout game, sort of mixed with a
like an RPG.
Yeah,
wasn't it?
Exactly. It was sort of breakout RPG. You played as a wizard, and your battles were a sort of breakout style breaking blocks with a paddle type of game, but there were all sorts of magical based power-ups, and it had this really cute, really well done pixel art style, and the pixel art was all done by Paul Robertson, who is also the pixel artist behind this game. Actually, it is a partnership between Paul Robertson, who did the opening and ending segments and boss animations, and another pixel artist called Stéphane Boutine. And he did all of the levels and I think most of the smaller enemies. And the game has the best looking pixel art. I mean, I can get really jaded about pixel art. I think a lot of the time that style is really overused. It can be used kind of lazily. It can be used by people who don't have a clear understanding of like what pixel art does well and what it doesn't. These guys are nailing it. Paul Robertson is the guy who you've probably seen videos of his stuff. He did a bunch of Adult Swim videos. I'll put some links in the show notes to them because they are amazing. Obviously, he did Mercenary Kings. He did Wizorb. He did, I think, Scott Pilgrim versus the World. And his partner on this also worked with him on a bunch of those games. So Paul Robertson and this other guy, Stéphane Boutine, are the kings of pixel art. And the style of this game knocks it out of the park. It's beautiful. The backgrounds are beautifully done and have this great color scheme. The character models and enemy models for the main sort of mobs or bad guy enemies look like something that you'd see on the Neo Geo Pocket Color. They have this gorgeous look to them. It's really, really cool looking. So the look really grabbed me, and I started playing it today on my Vita. You can check it out on your PlayStation 4 or Steam if you are one of the most of people who don't have a Vita. It's a couch co-op game, or you can play online. It's a beat-em-up. It's this sort of single-screen beat-em-up where you're surviving waves of enemies, and when you get to the end of each wave, you fight a boss. There's not a whole lot for me to say about it yet. I've barely even gotten to the first boss yet, but I just wanted to mention it on the show because I don't think it'll probably make a full episode of the short game, but it's super cool. I'm really enjoying it. The art is gorgeous. There's a prequel comic that's also done in a cool pixel art style that I'll link to in the show notes as well. I think it's a game that's definitely worth your attention, and it's only $10 on PS4. I think it's also only $10 on Steam as well. Let me double check. Yep, only $9.99. So it's really a cool game. You should check it out.
That
yeah,
sounds
if it's
cool.
got online co-op, I think I'll pick it up just to try and play with you.
Oh, twins.
Aw.
I'm I'm a big fan of Mercenary Kings. Molly and I have played a lot of that game together, and they did a great job with that. I can only imagine that they've learned and taken that game and really made
they
it.
actually really seem to have kind of stripped down and made a smaller, very focused game here. Mercenary Kings was a big game, tons of enemies,
is.
big levels, lots of bosses and other stuff to do, tons of missions. This is
It's almost too much.
Yeah,
like
it almost
that's
is.
the only thing with Mercenary Kings is it's kind of like, oh my god, like we played for 10 hours and it was like, okay, that's the intro.
Yeah, this is a very it's a bit more stripped down. It's definitely promising, and I just wanted to mention it. It's really cool.
Have you and Molly tried Helldivers yet?
We have not, but we're going to soon. So we got that game on Saturday, but we also like tore apart our living room in order to do a bunch of painting and kind of reorganizing of stuff, and didn't think about it, and actually had turned off and unplugged the PS4, so the game didn't download. And so not that our internet's super slow, but we turned it on last night to be like, hey, let's check this out, and it still had 3 gigs to download. And so that kind of put a hamper on that. So we're going to play that soon, though. I'm really excited about it. I actually listened to the episode of you guys talking about it that I was not on, and it finally convinced me to pull the trigger and check out the game.
Finally, we'll have to get a co-op match going pretty soon.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. It sounds and looks awesome. So we just got a sound bar and a subwoofer for the TV. So playing Limbo, spoiler alert for a future episode, it was infinitely creepier with the subwoofer. Just all the like whoa, 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 and the thumps of like the spider legs and stuff. It was perfect. It was like the perfect game to get along with a new sub.
Nice.
I've got to ask you for some advice about that because I'm looking into buying one as well.
Well, I have a small living room, so it's not. We actually kind of went like small scale because you don't need much for the little living room.
So there's a couple other games that I just wanted to briefly touch on. When I said at the top that this has been a really exciting time for short games, part of the reason is that just over the last couple of weeks, several what I would kind of consider AA titles, like games that are indie games but that have a pretty high profile, have come out. And neither of these is ones that we can probably report on very much. They may be the topic of future episodes. So if there's things that you've checked out and you have anything to say about, please do let us know. You can let us know through Twitter or go on our website and fill in our feedback form or email info@theshortgame.net. But what I'm talking about are Everybody's Gone to the Rapture, a game from, what is that studio called? It's basically a first-party indie that sort of falls under
Santa Monica?
Yes, thank you. The Santa Monica studio under Sony, and also Volume from Mike Bithell. And these are, I think, probably the 2 highest profile indie releases of the summer. I'm probably forgetting some big ones, but to me, they seem like the big ones.
Everybody Goes to the Rapture is from the same people that did Dear Esther, which is something that I have very much wanted to play, but I've never gotten a chance to yet.
Everybody's Gone to the Rapture looks really, really neat. It's PlayStation exclusive, which I think is a bit of a bummer, but it is out on the PS4, and I have been wanting to play it, but I know I haven't gotten a chance to do it yet. Shane, you've started it. Any initial impressions? Does it seem like something you may want to talk about on the show?
It's something I think would be right up our alley. It's a beautifully created, beautifully rendered English countryside town in Shropshire. It's very detailed where you want things detailed, and wandering around, you at least so far I've spent the whole time just sort of meandering and wandering and never run out of new things for it to be showing me that were surprising or interesting and moved the story along. So it seems like no matter they've done it in such a way where no matter which direction you turn, no matter where you go, you seem like you're always moving things forward story-wise. And I was at first thinking it would be kind of a sparse experience because I knew, by the concept of the game that all the people would be gone, but there's actually a lot going on. I don't want to spoil anything. It's pretty cool.
I'm looking forward to checking it out. Since it's a PlayStation exclusive, I know that'll be another episode where we'll need to exclude Laura. We've never been great at being timely. If you're really just interested in is this game worth playing? There are a lot of great reviews out right now. I read the one over at US Gamer, and I thought it was a great review. So if you're interested in hearing more about the game, check out some of the great reviews that are already live. We may or may not do that as a future episode as time allows, but it's definitely one that I'm really looking forward to playing. If it's something that you want to hear about on this show, let us know. Or if you've already played it, let us know your thoughts. The other game that I am really looking forward to playing that just came out yesterday is Volume by Mike Bithell, as I might have said earlier. Mike Bithell made Thomas Was Alone, which we gushed about to no end on this show. Thomas Was Alone was really, really good at telling a story that got you emotionally invested in polygons. Like
that is the most I've ever cared about a set of shapes.
Yeah. I mean, and it was done entirely through just incredibly well-written dialogue and, decent gameplay. It was a good platformer,
and a
good
nice
puzzle platformer.
A nice British voice narrator.
Yes.
Let's be honest.
This game, Volume, takes the same approach to storytelling and applies it to a stealth game. It's a 3D game, which Thomas Was Alone obviously wasn't. And it's a sort of modern or futuristic Robin Hood story where a character named Loxley is sort of breaking into digital vaults and stealing information from powerful people to distribute on the net. And I don't really know a whole lot else about it. Everything that I've seen in terms of the trailers has been pretty encouraging. It seems like they've got some good voice actors going, including Andy Serkis, who played Gollum, among many, many other things. He's got a great voice, and it really looks like a lot of fun. I haven't played a stealth game in a long time. I don't think we've played a stealth game on this show, although we've had a few that we've talked about doing and haven't been able to get around to.
Yeah, which is kind of weird because it's one of my favorite genres. I'm like desperately waiting for them to bring out the re-release of Dishonored.
Oh yeah, didn't that just come out this week?
It's out. Oh, I gotta go get that.
I think it's out now. Yeah. I think it's already waiting for me on my PlayStation 4 for when I have time in between other things. So Volume is really looking cool, and hopefully that'll be something you'll be hearing from us about on this show soon. It's out right now, as of yesterday when we're recording today, on PlayStation 4 and on Steam for PC and Mac, and it's coming out on Vita, but that version was delayed a couple of weeks, so that's not actually out yet. But I think it's like $20. Definitely check that out. And if you've already played it and have any thoughts for us, as of course you're probably hearing this a few days after we record, send us those thoughts at info@theshortgame.net. Go to our website and use our feedback form, or on Twitter @_shortgame. So apart from all of the video games that we've been playing for the show and otherwise, what have you guys been up to lately?
As usual, I am running my Dungeons and my Dragons, and I can't tell you guys how excited I am for the upcoming quest through the Mere of Dead Men.
Ooh, that sounds very dramatic.
Yes.
Wait, is it like a mirror made out of dead men?
Apparently, Mere is like synonymous with mire or swamp.
Why don't you just say mire?
Yeah, it's just a fantasy word. I don't know. That's how they wrote it in the adventure module.
Did you look it up in the pronunciation dictionary?
I did. Yes.
Okay.
I wanted to make sure that I wasn't mispronunciating my made-up fantasy land words.
Well, I have also been doing some stuff with miniatures recently. I recently picked up Robo Rally, a board game that I have played before, but not in many years. And there was a sale on Amazon and picked it up. That game's super fun, guys. If you haven't played Robo Rally, you should check it out. I don't know how much it costs now. It was on Amazon for like $20 on sale, which was great because it's got a bunch of little robot miniatures, and it's kind of a clever game. You sort of program your robots with little actions, and then everybody's actions resolve in a particular way, and your robots can end up zapping each other with lasers or falling into pits. Really fun. Interesting fact, designed by Richard Garfield, the guy who designed Magic the Gathering. So it's a pretty good game. Holds up. Totally worth playing.
Sure, yeah. I played a game called Star Realms the other day, which is a deck building game, which is fun. I've played some Dominion as well. But this was a much more aggressive deck building game than like...
Yeah, I just bought Star Realms.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Have you played it yet?
No, I haven't gotten a chance to.
Yeah, it's fun. If you know how any other deck building game works, it's the same, only instead of like, I'm going to build my deck to get the most victory points or whatever, it'll be like, I'm going to build my deck to destroy you and kill your deck, which is kind of fun. The games are pretty quick, too.
Sounds pretty neat.
But also, I am undertaking a project of something that is not generally what I am accustomed to, but I'm trying to build a Settlers of Catan board, like a custom built board.
Nice.
Yeah, it's something I've always wanted to try, and I finally was like, I'll give it a shot. So I bought a big piece of wood, and I'm starting. I got a skill saw, and we'll see what happens. But I got a lot of plans. We'll see if I actually...
Watch your fingers.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's like saws and stuff like that. I'm not new to that. But like making like finer objects, like perfectly shaped hexagons is really going to be a little difficult for them all to line up like I want them to. But I bought a big piece of wood, so I've got plenty of room for failure.
Well, good luck.
Yeah, thank you. If I do it, if I make it like I envision, I'll take a bunch of pictures and throw them up on like the Short Games Twitter or something. Pretty excited about it. I got a lot of plans. We'll see if I can do it or not.
Well, one last piece of news before we wrap out. I'm kind of excited because Sony moved their yearly convention, PlayStation Experience, to San Francisco this year, which means that I can actually get to it and don't have to buy a plane ticket or hotel. And they also brought the prices of the tickets down pretty significantly. So I thought, heck, why the hell not? I'll buy a ticket and see what it's like. So in December, I'll be heading to PlayStation Experience. If any listeners are going to be there as well, get in touch. I'd love to meet you folks. And I'm looking forward to hopefully checking out the Morpheus headset. I really am interested. I haven't gotten a chance to try on any VR headsets yet, so I'm hoping to get a chance to try that out. And if you want to drop us a line, either about that or anything else you've heard on this episode or any future thing that you think we ought to cover, please do get in touch. You can find us on Twitter @_shortgame, or you can go to our website, www.theshortgame.net, where there's a feedback form, or you can write to info@theshortgame.net. You can also find me on Twitter. I've been your host, Reagan Kelly, and I have been joined by Nate. Where can people find you on Twitter, Nate?
You can find me on Twitter @NateSTL.
And Shane, where can people find you?
I'm over at 8-Bit Shane.
And thank you so much for joining us on this episode of The Short Game.